Morning everybody, Chuck from Functional Fly, and today's fly is another classic fly. The Royal Wulff is a takeoff from the Royal Coachman. Lee Wulff wanted a fly that would ride a little bit higher in rougher water, and this spurred on a complete family of Wulff patterns. The Royal Wulff is probably the most well known though, so let's go ahead and get started with it. Okay, here we go. Okay, the hook that I have in the vise is a Partridge SLD2 barbless dry fly hook, and the thread that I am using is a Vivus 8/0 in black. Gonna tie in a millimeter or two behind the hook eye, and I'm going to come back to a point just before the hook point, and then I'm going to come back about halfway. I want the thread when I tie in my wing to be just a little bit beyond a quarter of the way back on the hook. The wing material for the Royal Wulff is white calftail. So I've cut off a pretty healthy clump here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is strip away any under fur, because that will keep the calftail from securing on the hook. And then if you want to stack your wing, you're welcome to do so. I prefer to do what I call finger stacking, where I'm grabbing the longest filaments off the tip and then bringing them back into a line with the majority. What it does is it gives you a pretty consistent wing length with a little bit of variation, which I think gives a little more natural look to the fly itself. So once I have the general wing shape where I want it to be, I'm going to measure this off. I want the length of my wing to be the shank of the hook plus the eye. So I'm going to look to see where the majority are. I've got a couple of stragglers that are a little longer, but the general length is right there. And so now I'm going to hold that point to where my thread is. Bring the thread up. Do a pinch wrap. I'm not going to let go of that wing yet. I'm going to come in, do one and two more pinch wraps, then a turn, and then I'm going to go ahead and make 2 to 3 turns with good thread pressure on the front side of the wing after I have posted that up. And that's going to help keep everything right up on top where I want it to be. Now, to split the wing, what I find is easiest is I'm going to rotate the fly towards me, so I'm looking at the top, and then I'll put my thumb right behind the wing, and I'll take my bodkin or dubbing needle and I'll run it right up through the middle of the wing and separate that into 2 segments. I'm going to go pull those apart slightly. Then I'm going to take my thread, come from behind the wing and through, bind down on the front with 1 turn. Then grab the front side, come right back up through that same gap. Then I'm going to take a quick look at the volume there. It's not quite right, so I'm going to go ahead and redo that split. Get that so that it's more even. One turn that way, then come the other way. I'm going to do 3 turns this way, because now I have the segmentation done. 3 more turns this way, and finally one in the final direction. What I'm looking for is ultimately about 4 turns in either direction, and that's going to help give me that good separation for the wings. Take a look in front. I have just a couple of stray fibers, so I'll go ahead and trim those away. Wings now in place. I'm going to take a couple of really good firm turns to help keep that calf tail in place. And then I'm going to take a look at the front of that wing. I want those splayed out at about a 30 to 40 degree angle. Now I want to put some taper onto this transition. I don't want to tie that calf tail in all the way back because it's going to create too bulky a fly and I don't have my tail in yet. So I'm going to raise the calf tail up at the back. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to come in at an angle. I'm going to trim that angle away. Now I have a little bit better transition towards tying in the tail. Now I do the tail a little bit differently from the original pattern. The original pattern calls for bucktail. I like deer body hair better. I think it's just a little bit stiffer. So I look for a darker piece of deer body hair, or darker shade I should say. And same thing, I'm going to get rid of all of this under fur. Now, the real soft fuzzy under fur, if you have a mustache comb or something like that to separate that out, save that under fur. It makes fantastic dubbing, especially on caddis flies and other smaller flies. And then I'm going to do the same thing with regard to stacking. I'm not a fan of tails that look like paintbrushes. I want them to have a little bit of natural variation. And the same thing on this. I like the tail on the Royal Wulff because you are looking for an especially buoyant fly. I'm going to tie the tail fairly full, and whereas normally it would be just the shank of the hook, I'm going to go with the full length of the hook from the hook eye all the way back to the bend. So I have that measured off. That's how much I want to hang off the end. Take that to the end of the hook, and then I can see where the taper is from the calf tail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut that mirrors that calf tail. Trim away the extras. And I'm going to bind that elk hair in right in, and I'm using fairly firm thread turns until I get back to the last turn or two. And then I want to relax that just a little bit, because if I pull it too tightly, that tail is going to really fray, and I don't want it to do that. I want the tails to look more natural. So I'll come forward and then I can make a stronger turn without making that splay out too much. I'll come forward, And now you can see I have a much smoother body to work with. And now we're ready to do the body. Now the body on these is 3 stages. It's a section of peacock herl, or 2 sections of peacock herl that are split by a segment of red floss. The proportions on that are entirely up to you. I've seen people go with real narrow bands of floss, other people prefer it wider. Whatever you think looks good, knock yourself out. I trimmed away the very tips of the peacock herl because they tend to be very fine and a little bit brittle. And so I'm going to tie this in and then come back to the point where I want to start my band of red. And I'm good right there. Don't want to go too far because the body on these does not extend up as far as a typical dry fly. The Wulff flies, because of the amount of hackling that you have at the head of the fly, it takes up more space. So I have my rear section of herl done. I'm going to come forward, trim the end of that floss so we're not dealing with a lot of stragglers. Tie in the floss. Wind that back. And then as I'm coming forward, I'm letting that floss flatten out just a little bit so it gives a nice, smooth, glossy look. And then I'll come forward, and you can actually come a little bit farther forward than you really intend for the floss to be on this, and that just makes sure that that you don't have any gaps between the floss and the peacock. That is done. Turn away that. For the last section of peacock, I can actually get away with using the same 2 pieces of peacock herl, and I'm going to wrap this back, and I'm going to wrap slightly onto the floss so that, again, I'm not getting that gap that I was worried about. A few more turns. Tie that off. Rotate the bottom towards me so that now I can trim this off on the bottom without worrying about catching the thread in there and cutting my own thread. And that body and tail are looking pretty much the way I want it to look. Now notice that the wing is still pitched a little bit farther forward. I'm not worried about that because when we put in the ramp, when we tie in this hackle, we're going to be bringing the wing a little bit more vertical. So I'm tying this in on the front side of the hook, and if you were to look at a magnified cross section of the hackle feather, it's more or less square. So I'm tying it in so that it lays in beside the hook, and then I'm tying it in at about a 45-degree angle, so that then as I come in here, I can trim this just a little bit shorter now. I'll bring the thread up in front, bind down the remainder of the quill, and then I'm going to take that hackle and I'm going to bring it, fold it up to a 90-degree angle, so that now as I begin to wrap it, and this is a fly that is very heavily hackled, so I'm going to go for 4 to 5 turns behind, if I can get it there, and I can. And then I'm going to pull those wings back, make my first turn in front as close to that wing as I can possibly get it. And you can see how those wings are now starting to become more vertical. And that's as far forward as I want to go because I don't want to crowd my head. So I'm tie off the hackle, and rotate the vise to get the thread out of the way, trim that, trim away a couple of those fibers. Now I'll stroke everything back, make sure I have all the ends covered. And then two whip finishes. And there it is. And that's Royal Wulff. Like I said, terrific fly for fast water. You can fish it on slower water as well. It's a great general attractor pattern, and hope you enjoy fishing it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Look forward to more videos with you.